On a hard, brassy Thursday morning in late October of 1957, in the dust-glazed dooryard of a 320-acre cotton place in Hale County, Texas, 40 miles south of Amarillo, on the Texas High Plains, a 31-year-old cotton farmer named Travis Hatcher stood in a thin, pale drift of Panhandle topsoil in his last clean Western shirt and watched a man from the Plainview Production Credit Association nail a printed yellow chattel notice to the radiator grill of his brand-new 1953 Ford NAA Golden Jubilee tractor. The notice was a foreclosure of chattel. It covered, by name and by serial number, the 1953 Ford-Ferguson tractor, a 1954 two-row Alice cotton picker, the deep irrigation well. Travis had drilled in May of 1953 a Ford F-100 pickup, 3 Butler grain bins, a Massey Harris combine, and the deed to the eastern quarter section of the Hatcher family place, every acre Travis had inherited from his father in 1953, and every machine he had bought on terms since. The man from the PCA apologized. He was a 33-year-old loan recovery officer named Dean Whitcomb, who had grown up 4 miles east of the Hatcher place. Dean had been in Travis's confirmation class at the Methodist Church in Cotton Center in 1942. He apologized twice. Then he nailed his yellow notice to the grill of the Ford, climbed into a maroon Hudson sedan, and drove the gravel road south toward Plainview. Travis Hatcher stood in his own driveway for a long time after the Hudson was gone. The brassy sky was the color of an old skillet. He did not go inside. He did not move at all. What Travis Hatcher had paid no attention to across the previous 4 years, while his brand-new tractor and his cotton picker and his irrigation well and his bin yard had been rolling onto that 160 acres on 6 and 7% interest, was the single sentence of advice his father, Clyde Hatcher, had given him in the parlor of the Hatcher farmhouse on the day of the will and deed signing in the spring of 1953. Clyde Hatcher had said it quietly. He had said it once, and he had said it again at the bottom of the back porch, in case it had not been heard the first time. He had said, "Son, never mortgage the land for a tractor." That morning, with the yellow notice flapping against the grill of his $1,895 Ford Jubilee, Travis Hatcher was finally fully listening. The Hatcher place had been homesteaded by Clyde Hatcher's father, Eli Hatcher, in the summer of 1903, a 320-acre quarter section of raw high plains sod 2 days wagon haul north of the railroad town of Plainview. Eli had broken it with a single-share moldboard plow behind 4 mules. He had built the first sod-roof dugout in the summer of 1903 and the small white-frame farmhouse in the spring of 1909. Clyde Hatcher had been born in the front bedroom of that frame house in 1890. He had grown up on the place, gone to the small one-room Cotton Center school through the 8th grade, and come back to the farm at the age of 14, and never lived anywhere else. He had married a Methodist girl from Plainview named Hazel Atchison in 1916, and he and Hazel had raised 3 children on the place. 2 daughters, Marie and Ruby, both gone to husbands in Lubbock by 1948, and 1 son, Travis, born in 1926, the youngest. Clyde Hatcher had bought the 1935 John Deere Model GP, brand new from the John Deere dealer in Plainview, in March of 1935, $375 cash. The entire profit of 2 good pre-Dust Bowl cotton years, saved coin by coin, in a coffee can in the back of the bedroom closet. He had run that tractor through the worst years of the Dust Bowl on the Hatcher place, through 1935 and 1936 and 1937, when the topsoil had drifted 4 feet deep against the north fence line, when the cotton had failed 3 years in a row, and when Eli Hatcher, who had been 72, had lived to see his only son keep the family land by paying every cent the family owed in 1933 and 1934 cash on the barrelhead, and refusing quietly, the way Clyde refused every loan that any Plainview banker had offered him during the worst of the drought. Eli Hatcher had died on the place in 1939 at 80, the day after the first good cotton crop of the recovery. He had said one thing to Clyde on the porch the evening before. He had said, "Son, the only piece of land a man truly owns is the piece he owes nothing on. Hold to it." Clyde Hatcher had held to it. He had run the 1935 John Deere on the home section for 18 straight years by the spring of 1953. He had never, in those 18 years, signed a single note at any bank. In the spring of 1953, the Texas High Plains was 3 years into the cotton boom. The Korean War had pushed cotton to 34 cents a pound. New irrigation wells were going down across Hale and Lamb and Castro counties on the back of cheap diesel and a falling water table that, in 1953, nobody yet knew was falling. The Plainview Production Credit Association had grown by 91% in 3 years on agricultural irrigation lending alone. The Ford-Ferguson dealer in Plainview had a 6-week waiting list for the new 1953 Golden Jubilee tractor. The Plainview newspaper carried twice a week full-page advertisements from the PCA with the headline, "Borrow against your cotton land. Grow faster. The 50s are here." Clyde Hatcher was 63 years old that spring. Hazel had died of pneumonia in the winter of 1951. Marie and Ruby were settled in Lubbock and were not coming back. And Clyde had decided on a Sunday afternoon in February 1953, sitting at his own kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, that it was time. He drove down to the lawyer's office in Plainview that Monday morning and signed a will and deed under which the eastern quarter of the Hatcher place, the 160 acres of better soil cotton ground at the east end of the home section, would pass directly to Travis on signing, free and clear. Clyde would keep for himself and for the rest of his life the western quarter, the small white frame house, the tin-roofed shop shed, and the 1935 John Deere Model GP. At the parlor signing on the Saturday afternoon, with Travis and his new young wife Marlene at the table, Clyde Hatcher said only one thing about money. He said, "Son, never mortgage the land for a tractor." He said it the way Methodist fathers in the Texas Panhandle say things once, quiet, no emphasis on any one word. Marlene Hatcher was pouring coffee at the sideboard. Travis said, "Yes, sir." Because Travis Hatcher, that Saturday in April 1953, was 27 years old, was sitting on 160 acres of his own ground for the first time in his life, was a month past his honeymoon, and was already 3 pages into the Ford-Ferguson catalog in his head. When Clyde Hatcher held the back porch screen door open for his only son on the way out, he said it one more time. He did not raise his voice. He said, "Travis, never mortgage the land for a tractor." Travis said, "Yes, sir." Again, he did not that afternoon hear it. By the second week of May 1953, Travis Hatcher was sitting at a clean desk in the air-conditioned office of the Plainview Production Credit Association, opposite a 38-year-old PCA loan officer named Hollis Pruitt, signing his name to the bottom of a 14-page note for a brand-new 1953 Ford NAA Golden Jubilee tractor, a 1953 2-row mounted cotton planter, and the drilling and casing of a new 400-foot irrigation well at the east end of his quarter. The total of the note was $11,480, financed over 5 years at 6 3/4%, secured against the deed to his eastern 160. Travis put $1,000 cash on the hood his last full year of seed cotton money and signed for the remaining $10,480 against the land. Hollis Pruitt congratulated him. He shook his hand. Hollis Pruitt told him more than once that 1953 was, in his professional opinion at the PCA, the best year to expand a Texas High Plains cotton operation that the Panhandle had seen since 1925. Travis Hatcher drove the new red and gray Ford Jubilee home that Saturday afternoon, slow up the Caliche section road with the Ford-Ferguson dealer's pendant flapping on the steering column. His father was at the shop shed when he pulled in. Clyde was sharpening a hoe. Clyde did not look up from the hoe. He looked at the new tractor in the corner of his eye exactly once and went back to the stone. When Travis climbed down from the seat of the Jubilee, Clyde Hatcher spoke without looking up. He said, "Son, did you mortgage the land for that?" Travis said, bright and easy, "Yes, I did, Dad." Clyde Hatcher set the hoe down across the rail of the shop shed bench, slow. He turned, slow, and looked at his only son for one long, quiet count of 3. And then he said only this, "Then I have not raised one of my boys right, and I am sorry for it." He picked the hoe up again, and he went back to the stone. For the first 8 months, Clyde Hatcher looked, on the surface, exactly wrong. The new Ford Jubilee pulled a cotton planter Travis had financed in June 1953 for another $1,800. He planted more acres faster. He hired a high school boy from Cotton Center. He took Marlene to a hotel in Amarillo for the weekend after Labor Day. He stood at the Plainview Cotton Producers meeting in October 1953 and told Hollis Pruitt in front of the room, "Hollis, you were right. The 50s are here." But the 50s were already here, and they were here in a way Hollis Pruitt had not predicted. By the spring of 1954, the Texas High Plains had received under 3 inches of effective rainfall over the previous 12 months. By the autumn of 1954, the figure was under 5 inches over 24. By 1955, the U.S. Weather Bureau in Lubbock was using the word worst in its quarterly summary, the worst drought to hit the Texas High Plains since the Dust Bowl, the worst sustained dry spell since 1893. Cotton prices, which had stood at 34 cents a pound in May of 1953 when Travis signed the note, slid to 28 in 1954, to 26 in 1955, and to 24 in 1956. The water table under Hale County, which had stood at 140 feet below ground in 1953, fell to 170 by 1955, to 210 by 1956, and to 240 by the summer of 1957. Travis Hatcher's new 400-foot well, which he had drilled to 110 feet of cased pump in 1953, ran dry in the August of 1955. He had it deepened at a cost of $950 financed back onto the same PCA note to 220 feet in October of 1955. It ran dry again in the September of 1956. He had it deepened a third time at a cost of $1,420 financed onto a new short-term note to 310 feet in November of 1956. It ran half dry through the summer of 1957, even at that depth. Travis Hatcher's operating costs went up. His cotton yield fell from 180 pounds an acre in 1953 to 92 in 1955 to 58 in 1956 to almost nothing in 1957. The Plainview PCA wrote him 3 letters in the spring of 1956, 2 more in the autumn, and a 6th in the spring of 1957. The cosigner the PCA had asked for on his short-term note. In November 1956, his older brother-in-law in Lubbock declined politely, and finally, in February 1957, to sign anything further. Hollis Pruitt was replaced in the autumn of 1956 by a younger man from a regional PCA office in Lubbock named Dean Whitcomb. Travis Hatcher renegotiated his operating line in the spring of 1957. He took a second mortgage on the Eastern Quarter in May of that year. He sold the Massey Harris Combine back to the dealer in July at a 38% loss. It was not enough. Clyde Hatcher, in the dooryard of his small white frame house at the west end of the home section, said nothing. He did not, in any of those 4 years, ever say the words, "I told you so." He did not say, "Remember what I said." He did not say one word in any direction about Ford or about Deere or about iron. He worked his hoes. He kept his garden. He ran the 1935 John Deere Model GP through the worst of the drought on his own western quarter, in low gear on the 14 acres of dry land he had kept in cotton through 1954 and 1955 and 1956. He brought in 51 pounds an acre in 1955 and 49 in 1956 and 44 in 1957, small numbers, but enough by the standards of the small, careful operation he had been running since 1916 to pay his property tax and his Hazel Atchison Hatcher Headstone Fund and his rural electrification bill in cash every December in 50s out of a coffee can in the bedroom closet, exactly as his father Eli had done in the Dust Bowl. He carried in the pocket of his denim work shirt the same small leather-bound farm account notebook he had carried since 1916, and the books in that notebook continued, all 4 years, to balance. In the spring of 1956, when Travis came up to the old farmhouse one Sunday afternoon to ask for an $800 short-term loan, Clyde did not lecture him. Clyde went into the bedroom, came out with $800 in 50s from the coffee can in his closet, gave them to Travis and said only, "Pay me back when you can. No interest." He did not ask what the money was for. He did not have to. Travis's hands, when he took the envelope, were shaking. The Hatcher equipment auction was held on a hard, brassy Saturday morning, the 2nd of November, 1957, in the gravel and caliche dooryard between Travis's small white tenant house and Clyde's tin-roofed shop shed. Travis came out in a clean western shirt and stood at the back of the crowd, hands in his pockets, hat low. Marlene Hatcher did not come out of the house. Their 2 small children stayed with her. The 1953 Ford NAA Golden Jubilee went first. The regional auctioneer started the bidding at $1,600 and got it down to $985 inside 2 minutes. It sold at $1,015 to a cotton equipment dealer from Lubbock. The cotton picker sold for $1,100. The pickup sold for $340. The well casing was bought back by the PCA. The Alice went for next to nothing. By 4 o'clock there was nothing in the dooryard except a square of caliche where the Ford had stood and a printed yellow PCA notice nailed to the door of the tenant house. Clyde Hatcher stood at the auction for the full 2 hours, 2 rows behind his only son, in a clean denim pearl snap shirt and his pearl gray Stetson. He said nothing to anyone. He did not bid on anything. He did not look at Travis. When the crowd was breaking up, Clyde walked across the dooryard to the porch of his son's tenant house, sat down on the top step, and waited. When Travis came around the corner of the house with red eyes and his hands deep in his pockets, Clyde stood up. He opened his arms. Travis Hatcher walked into them, and for the better part of 2 minutes, in front of the empty caliche square where the Ford had stood, he cried into his father's faded denim work shirt. Clyde Hatcher did not say one word the entire time. When Travis was done, Clyde patted the back of his son's head, slow, twice. He said mildly, "Travis, come up to the house for supper tonight. Bring Marlene, bring the kids. We will talk about what is next." Travis nodded. Clyde turned and walked, alone, across the caliche dooryard, the half-mile west to his own small white frame house at the head of the section road, because Clyde Hatcher had given his pickup to Travis in the August of 1957 and had walked the half-mile back and forth between the houses every day of every week since. The Plainview PCA resold Travis Hatcher's East 160 in the spring of 1958 at 36% of its 1953 value. The buyer, after a long, quiet conversation with Clyde, was Clyde Hatcher himself, paying in cash from the coffee can in the bedroom closet, with a small 10-year note at 4% from a Methodist neighbor in Cotton Center for the balance, the only loan Clyde Hatcher ever signed in his life. By the spring of 1959, the original 320-acre Hatcher Place was again under one ownership, debt-free except for the small 4% neighbor note. Travis ran it as Clyde's hired hand for the next 11 years for a fair cash wage. In 1968, Travis took a job at the Plainview Cotton Gin where he worked quietly and well for the next 26 years. Marlene went back to teaching school at Cotton Center in the autumn of 1958 and taught the 4th grade there until 1989. Clyde Hatcher lived another 19 years. He died of pneumonia in his own bed in February of 1976, 85 years old, with the same small leather-bound farm account notebook on the bedside table. He was buried beside Hazel in the small Methodist cemetery north of Cotton Center. The headstone Travis chose for him is plain Texas granite, with his name and his dates and one line beneath them. The line is from the book of Proverbs. It reads, "The borrower is servant to the lender." The 1935 John Deere Model GP is still parked under the same tin-roof shop shed at the head of the section road, where it has stood since 1935. The farm is run today by Travis's son, Wendell Hatcher, who is 63 years old, who farms the same 320 acres debt-free, who fires the GP once a year at the Hale County Heritage Cotton Day in Plainview, and who has, taped to the dashboard of the GP, the small yellowed piece of paper in his grandfather Clyde's careful pencil handwriting that reads, "Never mortgage the land for a tractor. Pay your debts, help your brother, keep the GP running." Dad? Travis Hatcher died of a heart attack in 1996 on a Saturday morning at the Plainview Cotton Gin where he had worked for the better part of his second life. He was 70. His will, when his children read it, requested that he be buried beside his father and his mother in the small Methodist cemetery north of Cotton Center. It also requested that his headstone be a plain Texas granite stone with his name and his dates and one line beneath them. The line was the same line as on his father's headstone. It reads, "The borrower is servant to the lender." If this story stayed with you, there are more like it on this channel. Forgotten Machines, Quiet People, and the Work They Did. Subscribe, and we'll tell you the next one.